For coming. Good afternoon. My name is Janice Starr, and I'm the current co-president of the League of Women Voters of Scarsdale. On behalf of the Leagues of Scarsdale, Larchmont Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, and the River Towns, I want to welcome you all to this League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the upcoming Democratic primary election for the New York 16th Congressional District to be held this coming Tuesday, June 26th. Our leagues are excited that all 4 candidates accepted our invitation to participate and are here with us today. The candidates in this election are running for the Democratic Party nomination for the November ballot, and the candidates are as follows: Joyce Briscoe, Elliot Engel, Derrickson Lawrence, and Jonathan Lewis. The League of Women Voters is a volunteer, nonpartisan political organization which promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan in that it does not support or oppose any candidate for public office. It is political in that it takes positions on selected governmental issues after member study and consensus. I want to recognize the co-chairs of the League of Women Voters Subcommittee who organized this event, Amy Cooper of the Scarsdale League and Susan Weisfeld of the Rivertowns League. All candidates have agreed to our rules for this candidate forum in advance. The time limits will be conscientiously enforced by our moderator, and our league member timekeepers are sitting in the first row, so all the candidates can easily keep track of the time when giving their statements and answers. Please remember that the Democratic primary election is this coming Tuesday, June 26th. Your local polling location will be open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. The League of Women Voters encourages all eligible citizens to vote. A couple of housekeeping items before I introduce our moderator. On your way in, you were provided with an index card and pencil to write down your questions for the candidates. During the first half of this forum, members of the leagues will pass through the audience and collect those cards with questions written on them. In the interest of time, a representative set of questions received from the audience will be provided to the moderator for the second portion of the candidate forum. And also, this event is being recorded. A link to the recording of this event will appear on the websites of the leagues sponsoring this event. Our plan is for the leagues to have the link available tomorrow. Last but certainly not least, I'll introduce our moderator for today's forum, Mr. Paul Schwartz. Mr. Schwartz is a resident of White Plains. He is a member of the League of Women Voters of White Plains and coordinates moderators for the Westchester County League. Mr. Schwartz is a retired teacher of English and public speaking, having spent most of his career in Scarsdale. Since retirement, he has devoted his time to a number of civic and community organizations, including the League. He serves on the board of the Public-Private Partnership for Aging Services in Westchester. He is active in the Rotary Club of White Plains, aging in place organizations, and affordable housing groups. He serves on the board of the White Plains Public Library and is president of the Board of Meals on Wheels of White Plains. He will provide us all with the rules for this event. We are very fortunate to have him here today. And with that, I'll turn the program over to him.
Thank you. Thank you. I shouldn't have given you all that. Okay. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to assist you today. I am here simply to facilitate a process which is between you, the voters, and the candidates. I live in White Plains, not in this district. You are here to listen to their views on significant issues, make your decisions. It's important that we allow the candidates to make the best use of this time. So for that reason, among other good reasons, I will ask that you refrain from applause during the program and hold your applause until the end of the closing statements. That may be a difficult request, but this is not an event for cheering your candidate. You've decided on your, it's not the World Cup. This is No, this is really for the undecided to hear all of the views in a civil discourse and to make their decision. So please honor that. Someone said to me today that they thought that the League of Women Voters format for debates was dull because it didn't allow for crosstalk, and I think I disagree with that entirely. We can do without the kind of stuff that we've seen in other venues. So let's go on. All right, you already mentioned that it's being recorded and it will be available. No other recording. Today it's so easy to make a recording. Everybody has a video recorder in your pocket. Don't. Thank you. No recording is permitted. And speaking of phones, mine is on airplane. What about yours? Make sure, please. We don't need those interruptions. All right? The ground rules for today's event as follows. First, each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for an opening statement. There will then be 4 questions from the league, prepared by the leagues that are jointly sponsoring the program, followed by 6 questions from the audience. Audience members were asked to write questions. I guess that's been mentioned. If you haven't handed it in already, I guess there are people to whom you could hand it in. There's somebody raising a hand in the back. And representatives of the league will select those for me to read aloud. They will choose questions which are relevant, not redundant, and covering an array of topics. Responses, again, will be limited to 1.5 minutes, and the order will rotate. After the question period, we will hear closing statements. Candidates, again, will each have 1.5 minutes in reverse order of the openings. As moderator, I will reserve the right to allow rebuttal at the close if warranted by the content of a closing statement. I want to thank our timekeepers who are sitting down in front, Adelaide and Matthew DeGiorgi. They have signs which say 30 seconds and stop, and you'll observe those. And I think we are ready to begin. The candidates have already been introduced. They are seated in the order that they drew lots earlier for opening statements. And so we will begin by hearing from Ms. Briscoe. Please.
Okay. So hi, I am a candidate for the 16th Congressional District, and my name is Joyce Briscoe. I am enacting the change in hopes that others join me, not being complacent, not being indifferent, and not being inactive or being helpless. I am doing something and want to help open the door for others to stand up and offer a voice as well. We are encouraged to participate in civic work and engagement in this country. We all have the ability and opportunity to become involved in political office and become public servants. Why not get involved and present a new voice and choices from perspective, what did I write? Let me see, I'm sorry. From perspectives that are closer to the people in the district. This is what we want as a country, new people showing interest, dedication, and commitment to change the country for the better. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ungle.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this. I want to thank my opponents for agreeing to debate, and I want to welcome everybody in the audience. This is American democracy at its finest, and I'm very pleased to be able to participate in this. I was recently named the most effective lawmaker, Democratic lawmaker in the House of Representatives by the Center for Effective Lawmaking. I was very proud of that. And that's because I work very hard and I am effective. I'm the chair of the Democratic Caucus on Foreign Affairs, the Democratic Foreign Affairs, and hopefully with the change in Congress, I'll be the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee after the November elections. I've lived in this district since I was 12 years old. I grew up in a city housing project with a father who worked very hard, was a union member, was a welder, and I learned what hard work does, and I know the pulse of this community. So I am the hometown boy who made it all the way to Congress to represent the areas that I grew up in the Congress. I'm very grateful for that. And I've represented people well. We have many district offices in the district. We've helped thousands upon thousands of people with personal problems or community concerns, and my voting record is in line with what the people of the district would want me to do. So I thank you for listening, and I look forward to a spirited debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence? There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Dirksen Lawrence. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this debate this afternoon, and I echo the sentiments of our incumbent of welcoming all here. I want to begin by stating why I'm running, and there are 3 reasons for it. The first emanates from a brochure that comes from the incumbent that shows 101 reasons plus 50 why you should vote for him. I believe it's 151 reasons why he wants you to remain complacent, because when you open the piece, what you read are following up authored and sponsored, authored and sponsored, authored and sponsored. The burning question today will have to be answered by the incumbent. How many of these have gone into law? And so I believe that the incumbent really isn't getting anything done. Now, the second reason is that the incumbent is not voting our interests, and I'll give you specifics as this debate unfolds. The third reason, a very important reason, we need substance if we're going to be Democrats and we're going to take back the House. It can't just be anti-Trump. It can't just be put in resistance. We need substance. I have differentiated myself from the rest of the field by providing substance, not just ideas, but something I call proof of concepts in jobs, in healthcare, in taking guns off the streets, and prescription drug prices. For those reasons, I ask for your vote next Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Lewis, and here's why I'm running for Congress. The business-as-usual Democrats, the corporate money they take, help make Trump possible. It's simply time for new leadership. I believe in an America where every child has equal access to excellent education, every citizen equal access to health care, the chance to start their own business, where Social Security is protected, where people can buy life-saving drugs at a fair price, where our economy grows because we have the 21st century infrastructure to support it. As I have walked the 16th district, you, my neighbors, have told me these are the issues that matter most, and I understand why. My own family lives with the challenge of life-threatening illness every day. My grandmother was a factory worker who fled to America to escape persecution in Europe. My father, the first member of our family to go to college because of the free education offered to him by City College. I have the experience to make this vision a reality. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a Democratic Party district leader. I built a company that invests in the municipal bonds that help to build our country. My elected and volunteer work on boards in Scarsdale and Yonkers gives me the know-how to solve problems in public education. My work on national security has been used in Congress. I have the energy, the skills, and experience to actually get things done. The times are too dangerous for business as usual. We need change. I can make a difference for you, and I will make you proud. Thank you.
Okay. And thank you for those opening statements, and it's time to move to questions. At this point, would you please put aside the notes for your openings? The candidates were allowed to bring prepared openings, but no other prepared notes. But you do have blank paper and pencils, which you can use as much as you like. So as I said, the first 4 questions have been submitted by the League. I will read them, and the order of the first question would start with Mr. Engel, and that is this. Given the recent SALT deduction limits, what would you do to help alleviate the tax burden on your constituency?
Well, what I would first do is get rid of Donald Trump. Donald Trump the House passed what Donald Trump calls a middle-class tax cut. It wasn't middle class at all, and for the people who live in New York understand that we'll all be paying more in taxes. because it was a very punitive way of getting back at states that didn't vote for him. We have to make sure that we cater to the middle class. We have to have real tax relief that makes the middle class life easier for the middle class. We are a high cost of living state, and as a result, we need to make more money in this state in order to live. And these farces that the President of the United States has put forward for in taxes are not something that should be allowed to stand. It's very difficult. We are a minority right now in the Congress, and we need to win in November so we can be a majority and pass the policies that I know people in New York State want us to pass. And so I will be very proud to be part of that new majority, and we're going to make sure that the American people understand that the Democratic Party has always been the party of the working person and has always been the party that cares about people. What really aggravated me with the tax adding was that it took
Thank you.
I just want to finish this sentence. Okay. What it did was it took a chunk out of the deficit. So they helped rich people, and it hurt the deficit and left the middle class to pay for it and clean up the spoils. That's not the way it should be.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
If you noted, the incumbent's response started again with Trump. Again, we have to provide leadership with answers and solutions. The question goes to the issue of property taxes, which is 65% of the total bill, if you will, for taxpayers today. The way in which we solve that is we need to look at our school district in terms of the cost, whether it costs per student, and figure out how to make this work, if you will. I've been successful in bringing institutions and people together in terms of building consensus and then finding results out of that. I will do the same in this particular process. Again, our county today, our county government does not preside over the issue of taxes as it relates to the school district, but I believe we can find the right people to come together and put together a plan and look at a wide range of alternatives to bring a resolve to this particular problem. So it is something that I believe I can do better than the candidates on this platform, and I will champion it. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
Well, first, I'd like to note that I agree completely with Congressman Engel that the solution begins with getting rid of President Trump and the Democrats taking the majority so that we can overturn this punitive tax code, this punitive tax law. That's absolutely correct. However, I'd note there are more things that we can do in the immediate future. For example, I believe that the role of a congressperson is to be a leader, to take tough stands, to lead difficult conversations in our community. And I think the very difficult conversation that we need to have if we want to reduce in the immediate term the impact of this punitive tax code, this punitive tax legislation, is actually to promote greater regionalization. For example, right now, the cost of services within our region is very much a function, particularly right here in Westchester County, of a myriad of municipalities, villages, towns, cities, all of which offer redundant services, redundant staffs, and redundant cost structures. This is a tough conversation to have, but as our state and local taxes show, and they're very high, and that's why this is so punitive to us, we actually do need to manage our cost structure, and there actually are ways that we can lead on it. And so as congressperson, I would use the very, very significant opportunities of a congressperson to lead important conversations at the federal, state, and local level to tackle this extremely tough conversation, which is we can't afford business as usual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure if most of you are aware, the way that most districts get their budget is through the census, which is a very antiquated system, and that's how your budget is actually brought about. The budget, when you're counting the people and you actually relying on people to tell you how many people are inside of their home or inside of their neighborhood, the technology that we have nowadays is much far advanced than what we're using now. So oftentimes, in giving a budget, we really miss the mark. And so we really have to do away with that. But then I also think that more entrepreneurship should be put in place so that we can get more revenue into different districts or different neighborhoods, because many people have a lot of ideas, and if each person go on and we have more entrepreneurs making sure that they're actually bringing in revenue and bringing in and helping the tax dollars to go up, I think that would help. That's just one idea that I may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the next question starts with you, sir. And that is, what environmental priorities do you support, and how do you propose to fund them? What environmental priorities do you support, and how do you propose to fund them? And that's first to Mr. Lawrence.
Let me begin with just the frustration of seeing us withdraw from the Paris Accord and knowing how that has impacted us significantly. But I believe, obviously, environmental issues are all local, and there are a number of things we can do. Specifically, the ideas of looking at issues of flooding, the issues of clean energy, the issues of a wide variety of opportunities to lower costs and improve the environment are things that I would do. Funding that, I don't believe should be a significant issue, considering that we've spent $1.3 trillion in the last tax bill to give to corporations and big and high earners. So I think making that case has to be driven by ensuring we have the right leaders in Congress to bring about those results.
That's to you.
The single greatest environmental challenge to us right now in this region remains Indian Point. Indian Point nuclear facility not only is a national security risk, not only was it a grave error in judgment to put such a facility in such a populated area, but now, with the good news that the end of Indian Point is in the near future, we in fact still remain greatly challenged by what will be done with the nuclear fuel that is being stored there. How will it be handled? Where will it go? This is a danger, not just for the people who live there now, it's for the people who live there next year, next decade, next half century, next century. This is the gravest problem. And we have to do better. We have to focus more. We have to think through more carefully about it. I remember about a decade ago, I co-chaired a panel on this subject with Dr. Richard Garwin, who was the chief science advisor to a number of presidents. And we talked about this problem together. And at the end of the day, this is the single most important problem. It's going to be costly to clean it up. And obviously, we don't have a lot of extra money right now in our budget, but we do in the Department of Defense budget. McKinsey did a study for the Defense Business Board that showed we have approximately $125 billion of cost inefficiencies in our $600 billion defense budget. We need to make our priorities fixing our home, fixing our environment, empowering the EPA, increasing the EPA's budget to tackle big problems like this. That's the single most important problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Briscoe.
Well, it's definitely a belief of mine. When people come together and they bring their voices together, things can happen. And as you know, with Indian Point, if people didn't come out to protest, I don't think they would have moved. Now, with we have clean energy, we have the solar panels. I think the regulations that they are taking off of many of the industries is a big mistake. But we have to get people to definitely understand what's going on, and like I said, speak in one voice, because it works. We see just with the recent immigration problem with the children, when everyone spoke in one voice, things started to move. And if we want to make sure that we have clean energy and make sure that the EPA is doing their job, we need to speak in one voice, because the president now, he's trying to take away all the, he's making sure everything is deregulated, and I think that's a travesty.
Thank you. I've been endorsed by the New York League of Conservation Voters and by the Sierra Club. My ratings are consistently in the mid-90s or high 90s in terms of being rated on environmental issues. We have a president who is anti-environment. He pulled us out of the Paris Accords, much to everyone's chagrin. He wouldn't know good environmental qualities if it hit him in the head. He instead will back the big polluters and who don't care about clean air or clean water that's necessary for us to leave to our children and our grandchildren. And I have been confronting him. I've been taking him head on. I am on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We have been talking about all the things that Trump has been doing. It's actually an absolute disgrace if any one of us would have ever thought we'd be in this position. But you need qualified leadership to take the president on. You need people with a record to take the president on, and I'm willing and ready to do that, as I have for the past couple of years on so many issues. But when we talk about the environment, this obviously is one of the main issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the third question from the League. Do you endorse the proposed citizenship question on the next U.S. Census? And what steps would you take to support your position? And that starts with Mr. Lewis.
Everybody who's in the United States right now should be counted. Every single person. Why? This is the United States of America. Everybody who's here should have a clear, open, and legal path to citizenship. We're a nation who should be leading the world in open arms, in being humane, in welcoming. What's happening right now in our country today is a disgrace. Before our very eyes, we're watching this president take us from democracy to oligopoly to fascism in a blink of an eye. It's unconscionable. So we need to take a stand, and in the census, by counting everybody, we make the clear statement that everybody's welcome, because they are, and they should all have a path to citizenship. And by the way, with regards to a path to citizenship, my own view is when it comes to the separation of children from their parents at our borders and what we're seeing going on in our country today, yes, that also represents fascism, but you know what else? We need to solve that problem and solve it by showing we're bigger than that. These children need to be brought together with their parents immediately, and we need to show that we're better than this and offer all of these families who have been separated immediate path to United States citizenship. We can't choose who to include and exclude in our country. Everyone's welcome here.
Thank you. And Ms. Briscoe?
Okay, so you said the new question for the censors, right?
Right.
I'm just making sure.
Right. Do you endorse the proposed citizenship question on the census?
I don't think that there's a need to ask the question of, are you a citizen? We need to make sure, like I said, the system that we have now is very antiquated, and and I think it works. That works for their favor, and that's why they're not going to try to make it any more efficient. We're just taking an accounting of each person that's here, and oftentimes, if you decide to ask someone if they're a citizen, that may dissuade them from participating, and we don't want that. But like I said, the whole way in which we're doing it, I'm sure there's a better way that we can use in order to count each person. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. The question, are you a citizen, is put there for one reason and one reason only, to get people who are not citizens to prevent them from registering with the census. That's the reason. You know, Republicans have been very good all around the country at throwing obstacles in people's paths to try to make it harder for them to vote, wanting to show all kinds of ID, making it harder. They want to keep the turnout down so that they can control it. This is nothing that we can accept. There is no reason to ask if anyone is a citizen. If we are undercounted in New York, we could lose 1 or 2 congressional seats because the census is what determines how many members of Congress each state will represent. This is in line with the president's anti-immigration attitude and trying to help people who want to lift themselves up. I think that we will continue to make noise about it because this is America. We stand for something. We shouldn't go down to the lowest common denominator. We need to count every single person in this country, and we need to make sure that every person who can vote should vote. Instead, what the Republicans do is they gerrymander the districts, they throw all kinds of obstacles in front of people, so people won't be able to vote. This should be called out for what it is, racism pure and simple.
And Mr. Lawrence?
Are you a citizen is a question that has challenged me for a good part of my life, as I had to wait 15 years to become a citizen. And so I know the challenge that many who are not in that category face today. When I see children ripped from the arms of their parents, I identify with that challenge. When I first attempted to come forward, we were not successful initially. We had to wait for another week or so to come back, but we weren't put in cages. So I understand the challenge today. But I believe that we are fortunate to live in a country that's based on the consent of the governed, that opens its arms to people of different cultures, where we speak different languages and we worship different faiths. And that's what we're fighting for. So yes, I would certainly want to ensure that citizenship is something that becomes less of an issue. It's the law today. We have to work within that. And it's something that I respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so the last of the 4 league questions, and this starts with you, Ms. Briscoe, at the end. What do you see as the most pressing foreign policy issue facing the United States? And as a member of Congress, what steps would you take to address it?
The most pressing. I mean, well, the most pressing now. I would think still that the wars that we're having in Afghanistan, and let me see, as a Congress member, I would let me think.
It's a tough one.
I mean, with anything that we do as far as the armed services are concerned, I would definitely reach out to my constituents and make sure that whatever decisions I make, I want to make sure that they're backing me 100%. And I feel that it's very important that any move that I would make, that I'm speaking in the voice for the people in my district. So I would definitely make sure I have their backing with whatever decision that I speak or say anything that I say in Washington, I would make sure that I'm an ally for my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Engel.
I'm the ranking member on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which means I'm the lead Democrat, which means if the Democrats get a majority, I will be the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Part of the problem, of course, is we have a president who conducts foreign policy, which I call fly by the seat of your pants foreign policy. One day it's one way, one day it's the next way. There's no consistency because the president lacks consistency. Frankly, he doesn't know what he's doing. We've had a situation where we know that the Russians interfered in our democracy. Trump won't admit to it. We want to get to the bottom of it. We want to know what happened. I don't want any country interfering in our democracy, certainly not the Russians. North Korea, another very important issue. One day Trump is calling off the summit. The next day he's going to the summit. No consistency whatsoever in this foreign policy with this president. We've had a NATO alliance that has really done us well since World War II, since 1945. We've stopped Russian aggression. We've done lots of things. President Trump does nothing but insult the alliance, tries to rip it apart, says it's outdated, says it's old-fashioned, insults the President of Canada and all the people that are our allies. This is no way to have a government run. So as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I would use this as active, and to be active, to hold hearings, to call out the president, to stop the kind of foreign policy that he's been putting forward, which is no consistency. I would do that because I'm the leader of the Democrats on foreign policy, and I look forward to being the chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
Okay. Mr. Engler has actually failed in his role as the ranking member, and I'll give you some instances on that. Number one, some 10 or 15 years ago when we had the Iraq War, Mr. Engel voted, I think, in error when he supported Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya at thousands of dollars, trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, and chaos in the Middle East. I think we've seen that again when it came to the Iran nuclear deal, when we had an opportunity to keep the lids on nukes, and Mr. Engel voted against our sitting Democratic president on that issue. Yes, it's been scuttled today, but we see the back and forth here in terms of really not voting our interests. And so today we have a North Korean issue, and it's a challenging one for a couple of reasons. The first is that the president believes he may have some sort of structure here, but it's more of a back-of-the-envelope type of deal. Ironically, it's when you look at the Iran nuclear deal, which had the structure and the verification of the International Atomic Energy Agency, they were able to ensure that things could go forward. Today, we don't have that with this deal, and I believe that, in fact, is the exposure to us in foreign policy.
The question is, what is the most pressing foreign policy issue for the United States of America? The answer, we're overextended. As Paul Kennedy wrote about in The Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, great societies collapse when they've overextended themselves, when their weight of their military obligations essentially forces their economy into a longer-term decline. Well, welcome to America in 2018. That's where we are today. And we got here because of a series of serial interventions supported by Congressman Engel that have committed the United States to being obligated to fight and deploy forces all over the world. I know something about this. I've written 2 books on foreign policy for Yale University Press. When I was getting my graduate degree in history, my professor was McGeorge Bundy, President Kennedy's National Security Advisor. And working with people like Bundy and Walt Rostow, architects of our Vietnam policy, I learned that the problems with the best and the brightest, a phrase coined by David Halberstam, is that sometimes we think we're so smart we can remake the world in our own image. But guess what? We can't do that. We have to realize the limits of our power. And so the greatest single problem for U.S. policy today is that we have the wrong policy. We're over-reliant on military endeavors. We're over-reliant on military aid as a substitute for global economic development. The best days of our foreign policy, think the Marshall Plan. We sought to invest in the world to promote peace and economic development that made the citizens of those other countries wealthy and have a stake in life. Let's give the people of the world a stake in life.
Thank you. Okay. So at this point, we'll move to the audience questions. And I just want to tell you that, well, sometimes we read the name of the author of the question. That's not the procedure that's being followed here. You may hear yours used. I'm sure there were more questions submitted. Please don't be upset if yours is not used. They have ruled out duplicates and tried to balance this over a number of topics. So here goes, and in the first one, Mr. Engel, you will have the first shot at this. And number one is, what are your plans to make certain that small businesses continue to thrive in our district?
Well, I think, first of all, obviously, when you are representing constituents on a federal level, the federal government should do much more. We haven't done enough to help small businesses. We haven't done enough to put policies in effect that actually help these businesses thrive. We have catered too much to large corporations. We have catered too much to these entities that have all kinds of power. I believe that we're a country of 50 states. There's a reason why our forefathers put it that way, because they didn't want the federal government to run roughshod over the states, and they wanted the states to have some independent power. So I will continue to work with all the elected officials on a local level, on a state level, on a federal level, to ensure that small businesses are being helped. I have been endorsed for re-election by virtually every Westchester elected official, and there's a reason for that. It's because I work with people, and together we make progress, and that's what I would continue to do.
Mr. Lawrence?
Okay. Well, in terms of small businesses and how we can keep them afloat, I founded NY16 Tank 3 years ago, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and the Bronx, for that very reason, understanding where we were economically. The seed tank was established to get small businesses to help them grow, graduate, and flourish. And we formed an incubator with Westchester Community College. The ideal here was to fund that program, and I did that, $10,000 of my money, to execute a proof of concept. The proof of concept actually worked, because the idea was to get students from WCC to participate in this tech firm that we funded. So the tech firm now, I'm pleased to admit, it's going on to now $1 million raise, but more important than that, the students, when I checked back 7 months later to figure out how that money was spent, they said, Mr. Lawrence, it was so competitive, the students didn't want the money. They wanted the experience. And so now they've gone on to higher paying jobs by being able to write that off on the resume. That is a proof of concept. Not only is that flourishing, we just got another conversation with another school in Westchester County, another college, who wants to replicate the same thing we did with WCC. I believe if we can get federal dollars in our district to leverage that and scale that, we can multiply that effect all across the district.
Thank you.
That's the way you get it done.
Thank you.
We need specific policies from the federal government to support the growth of small business. It's actually a national security risk that we don't have small businesses flourishing. For example, right now, we have a concentration of power in our largest companies that is a grave threat to the long-term sustainability of the United States economy. Startups are in decline. They've been in a 20-year decline. That's not healthy. It's not healthy when you have an economy built on just a few very large companies. And in point of fact, the Democratic Party has been complicit in the concentration of power in these largest businesses. Our Democratic elected officials take PAC money from defense, from pharma, from telecom, from media, and have done little to support small business. I have a Startup Nation plan that will help small businesses in this district get access to capital, and not only get access to capital to start, but actually create incubator zones such that small businesses have a place to go to get themselves off the ground. Furthermore, my Startup Nation business plan, which you can find on my website, will also help resolve the student debt crisis. Students are coming out of college with 6 figures in debt. Of course they're not starting companies anymore. So my startup business plan will do the following. If a student wants to start a company, they get a moratorium on interest and debt payments. If after 5 years they've created 5 jobs, half of their debt's forgiven. If after 5 years 10 jobs have been created, all of their debt's forgiven. Let's unleash the power of entrepreneurship in our youth to create a more robust local economy and finance the Small Business Administration to get it done now.
Thank you, thank you. And Ms. Briscoe, you're last on this.
I believe that the government can relax a lot of the rules that are put on small businesses. It seems like the only people that tend to, or the companies that tend to benefit or have a lot of loopholes are the larger companies. It seems that a lot of people are making their way, as you see on YouTube. They have startups and they're making money in those ways. We need to encourage entrepreneurship and make sure that they are able to thrive. As my colleague said, oftentimes the people at the top who are creating the rules do not rely on the people who are being affected by the rules. And they are very smart people, and we need to look to them often for different ways of going forward. And we don't consider them the brains of the nation, but they are. They're the blood, they're the heart and soul of the country, and we should treat them as such.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and on the next one, Mr. Lawrence, you get first crack at this one. And it is, would you support a single-payer healthcare system?
Repeat that question again? Would I support a single-payer healthcare system?
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's written as a yes/no question, but I'm assuming you'll have more than one word.
All right, well, look, I support a single-payer healthcare system. New York State has its healthcare initiative, Healthcare Act. Because the ACA is no longer performing the way in which intended, it's been scaled back through Republican means, and right now, the issue of having I'm trying to think of the term that's been used to ensure that we have longevity, is not working. But my concern right now is about how you implement the healthcare plan. And my view is to do it in a tactical fashion, an incremental fashion. What I proposed is lowering prescription drug prices. And I brought New York State Medical Alliance together and the Medical Society together to formulate a plan. And what we came up with was with 2 issues. One, we learned that sometimes the copay is more than the price as it relates to prescription drugs, and specifically as it relates to generic drugs. That means if your copay is $40 and the generic price is about $5, somebody's clawing back the other $35, and that's wrong. I developed legislation to get that changed, and George Latimer in the Senate actually carried that, and Gary Pretlow in the Assembly. This year we had a little bit of difficulty, but we're going to be expanding that. On the larger scale, I believe New York State ought to have its own prescription drug price initiative to compete with the status quo. That's how you bring down prices. But again, it's a stepped approach, and these are all public options.
Thank you.
Yes, I support a single-payer healthcare system. Obamacare was a great step forward, but it still left millions and millions of our neighbors uninsured. And with the Republicans gutting Obamacare, millions more uninsured. We've got about 40 million people uninsured in this country. How can that be right? How can we be a great nation when so many of our citizens are at risk? We need a single-payer system. Canada's got one, South Korea's got one, Taiwan's got one, and of course the life expectancy in these nations is longer than ours. These people are healthier than ours. We need to be a nation that is strong and healthy where we take care of our own. I'm for a single-payer healthcare system because I also believe it's the best way to deal with the pharma crisis we have. Right now, there are people buying pill cutters from CVS to cut down their pills because they can't afford their life-saving medicine. That's a shame. So we need Medicare to be able to negotiate on behalf of all citizens as part of a single-payer system, because the escalating cost of pharma, it's gone too far. Both of my children have type 1 diabetes. They need insulin to live. If they don't get insulin, they die. That's the truth for every type 1 diabetic. The price of insulin is up 300%. in the past decade while family incomes are stagnant. We need a single-payer health system to deal with this. Congressman Engel, he takes money from a long, long, long list of pharma PACs, and while he may have raised his hands for a number of very good votes, where has his voice been on this issue? Why hasn't he spoken out about it? Why haven't we heard him give a passionate speech against the companies that donate money to him? We need a single-payer system now.
Thank you. Ms. Briscoe.
I agree with that we should have a single payer system. As was stated before, the ACA, I feel like if given a chance, it would have worked, but too many people had other agendas. And we have to make sure we keep the goal in mind to make sure that everybody is covered. And if we keep that goal in mind, we'll all work towards a single payer system so that everybody is covered in America.
I'm for a single-payer plan. That's really Medicare for all. I've been a co-sponsor of that bill for many, many years. It's H.R. 676. I'm also in the committee that does health care, which is the Energy and Commerce Committee. Many of us wanted this bill. We didn't have enough votes. We then went down to what's now called Obamacare. We wanted to put a public option in that, so if the federal government put a price, it would force the insurance companies to lower their prices in order to compete. We didn't have enough votes for that, so we passed what we had. The Republicans have been systematically dismantling Obamacare. It's an absolute disgrace. We are the only industrialized nation that does not have this kind of medical coverage for its citizens. And we need to change that. Again, a Democratic majority in the House and hopefully in the Senate, we will change it because it's very, very important. I have voted many times to have Medicare as part of a larger package so that the government would be on the side of the people and not on the side of the large pharmaceuticals. I have voted consistently to force these pharmaceuticals to come before the Congress and to make sure that they are not
Thank you.
doing the kinds of things that we want to stop them from doing. Medicare
Thank
for
you.
all, that's the best way to go in this country.
Thank you. Okay, and on the next question, Mr. Lewis, you're first. Another major program, and that is, how can we protect Social Security for future generations, and how do you plan to keep Social Security solvent?
It's critically important we make good on our promises to our elder citizens. People who receive Social Security have worked their entire life for that benefit. My dad was a New Deal Democrat, and thank God for Social Security that when my parents were older, they were able to benefit from this wonderful program. Social Security survives when we as a nation are economically strong, when our economy is vibrant and growing. Furthermore, Social Security survives when we have a pyramid with a lot of young people at the base and the people who receive the benefits at the top. Because at the end of the day, Social Security is financed by the people who are working every day in our economy. I believe there's a very American solution, a solution we can all be proud of, that makes Social Security safe and secure for all generations. Open our doors. Let in the immigrants who want to live here. Let in the hardworking people who make our economy strong, robust, and grow. We have to do it. It's actually right and it's economic. Right now, we have a birth rate of 1.8 children for every couple. That means we're not replacing our population. If we don't open our doors, Social Security is going to fail. I'll repeat that. If we don't open our doors to immigrants who want to come here and work hard, Social Security will fail. The best solution for Social Security is to reach and look within ourselves and be our best as Americans and welcome the world.
Thank you. And Ms. Briscoe.
I recently learned that there's a certain group that if you're making a certain amount of money that you do not pay into Social Security, And I think that everyone should pay into Social Security, because in the event that that particular group who happen to be making, let's say maybe they're the top 1% or 2%, let's say they fall below that level, then they would have to rely on Social Security. And I just think that it's something that would help others because they're not paying into the system. And I just feel that everyone, that would be an immediate fix, that everyone should pay into Social Security, not just those who are the working class.
Thank you.
There's nothing more important in people's lives than Social Security. The Republicans have systematically tried to gut it, tried to gut Medicare and Medicaid. I mentioned before about the tax cuts that they talked about, middle-class tax cuts. They weren't middle-class tax cuts at all. They were tax cuts benefiting the wealthy. And in New York, we're all going to pay because it limits the things that we can deduct. It was just a punitive measure that was just absolutely disgraceful. We have to make sure that Social Security is shored up. When the Republicans put in that tax cut for the wealthy, what they did was add it to the deficit. Adding to the deficit hurts Social Security because one day we're not going to have enough money to pay for all these things. And so don't let any Republican say that they're for fiscal responsibility, because the Republicans, starting with the president on down, has shown that they're really not.
Mr. Lawrence?
Again, this is about practical solutions, and you look at the numbers. Clearly, our Asian population right now is having an impact in terms of how we fund Social Security. And so in doing so, we have to be innovative. Yes, incumbent just referenced the $1.3 trillion that have been given by the tax cut. So our wealthiest top 1% are getting more. So they ought to give more at this juncture. And one of the simple ways of doing this is you have a cap right now at $118, right? And so we ought to be looking at raising that number and adjusting it. We don't believe they have to take the entire burden, but we need to look at those opportunities. Those are the kinds of things we need to do. In the remaining time, let me go back to what some of my colleagues said earlier in terms of prescription drugs. I believe you mentioned that Medicare can negotiate prices, and because of the Modernization Act of 2003, they cannot. So my proposal in terms of New York State having its own dispensary, I think, makes a lot more sense, because New York State has that ability under the ACA to actually carve out a way to negotiate with drug companies to then bring down prices. So I think that's an approach that works, and it's something that I would advocate as a congressman to bring our state together to ensure that 27 million folks in New York can get low prescription drug prices.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. They didn't fix it this way, but I think it's appropriate, Ms. Briscoe, that you get this one first.
Okay.
Okay? Because here's the question. How will you fight for women's rights on all fronts? What women's organizations have endorsed you?
Wow, on all fronts. I mean, I definitely feel that women need to be given just equal opportunity. I mean, there's nothing that we don't need anything special. We just need to be treated equally and get the same opportunities that our male counterparts get on all fronts. And we need to make sure that the government is backing us and making sure that this is enforced across the board. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Engel.
When we talk about women's rights, one of the things we talk about are women's health and a woman's right to choose. I have a 100% voting record of pro-choice, and I'm very, very proud of it. That's why the Planned Parenthood Action Fund has endorsed me. NARAL Pro-Choice America has endorsed me. WCLA Choice Matters, and here in Westchester, has endorsed me. I've been unwavering and consistent about it. So we have to make sure when we talk about health care that every woman, like every citizen, has the right to make determinations that are between her, her doctor, and her God, and government should get out of people's bedrooms and frankly, and get out of people's lives. I always chuckle again when my Republican colleagues talk about smaller government, except they really want government to interfere in people's most personal matters, and giving lip service to women while at the same time trying to take away their right to choose. That's not the way it should be, and that's why the Women's Equality Party has endorsed me. All the groups that have pushed on Capitol Hill for women's rights and women's health, I'm pleased to have all their endorsements.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence.
Women's rights are an important factor as we evolve as a nation. We know of their start with the suffrage movements, and they've continued to push forward, and obviously we welcome that as that goes on. I believe that as they become successful, they contribute to the economic prosperity of our nation, and so we ought to continue that. The issue of having control of their bodies, the issues of allowing them to speak in a way where we've seen the Me Too movement take on a life of its own. Women have come into to the fore today. There's still a lot more that needs to be done to take down barriers, but again, they're equal partners, and they ought to be treated as such. Thank you.
As a congressperson, I will fight for equal access to reproductive health services for women and ensure that all women, regardless of income levels, have the opportunity to gain such access. That includes equal access to contraceptives. That includes equal access to safe abortions. And I will fight for the Equal Rights Amendment. It is a shame that this has not happened yet in our country, and it is long overdue. And that's why I support the three-state strategy to get this done. Now, I'll also note that it's critically important that we protect women with expanded and tougher regulations to be built into Title IX authorities. Women need to be safe on college campuses. They need to be safe in Congress too. That's why I support the Me Too Congress Act. But I would note that my fight in this area begins a long time ago when I met my wife Laura, who is then working with now as a volunteer. And together, we would escort women into abortion clinics past the protest lines that were created by Randall Terry and Operation Rescue. And let me tell you, doing that in the late 1980s and early 1990s seared into my mind that the fight for women's access to reproductive services and safe abortions is a front lines issue, and we need to be there on the front lines and make sure this gets solved. And I'm so proud of my daughter Hannah, who's sitting right over there, who worked at Planned Parenthood this year. We need to protect women by making sure Planned Parenthood is always fully funded and fight for that at all times. And I'm so proud of my wife Laura, who's sitting right next to her, who is the one who I used to walk with at those abortion clinics so those women could gain safe access without harassment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This is a topic that was touched on a little earlier, but here's a specific question, and this starts with Mr. Engel. What recommendations do you have for immigration legislation, including proposals concerning the current immigration situation affecting children being placed in detention centers?
Well, first of all, the children being placed in detention centers or being separated from their parents really breaks my heart. It is so un-American. It is so unlike what we stand for that the president, once again, should be ashamed of himself. We had a press conference here in Westchester with myself and my colleagues Anita Lowy and Sean Maloney, and I introduced legislation that I'm putting forward to make sure that, as the ranking member again of the Foreign Affairs Committee, that we have our embassies in the three countries of Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador, that the personnel at our embassies work actively with the State Department, which our committee has jurisdiction over, to make sure that those children are reunited with their parents, and we need to abolish this policy once and for all. I'm the grandchild of four immigrants. My grandparents were both immigrants. All four of them were immigrants coming to escape pogroms of Eastern Europe. This country has always been the hope for people who are with persecution. And for us to be so heartless and to turn down these people and to separate them from their children, quite frankly, it's racism pure and simple. It really is, because I don't think he would do that if these people weren't from Central America.
Thank you. Mr. Lawrence?
Well, I've expressed to you my view regarding immigration, as I am in fact an immigrant. But I think what we have to do is look at the reasons why people are coming across our borders, and they vary. Quite frankly, they vary. Economic reasons, persecution. And I think we need to have the kind of policy that reflects that understands that ferret that out. And you do that at the border. So you need to have we are a nation of laws, yes, but you need to govern with heart. And I think that's what's lacking today. So these are the things I believe we need to put forward as we formulate a plan to do this. So right now it isn't working. The president has had to go back on some of those options. And I think we need to be sensitive to the needs of parents and children. They are in fact human. And we need to reflect that in our policy.
Cheers.
Congressman Engel said it breaks his heart that ICE is separating kids, and I'm sure it does, and I know it breaks all of our hearts here because it's a tragedy. We all know that, and we all know that it's un-American. At the same time, we need to acknowledge that ICE is a creation of Congress, and Congressman Engel voted for the creation of ICE. Once we've created a government agency that violates our American values, we have two choices. Do we stand by and be complicit, or do we do something about it? As a congressperson, I will take aggressive action to defund ICE, to replace it, and in the only way possible, which is to apologize to these families who we've caused such untold emotional and human tragedy, fast track them for American citizenship. The only way to make up for a mistake is to apologize and to correct your action. These families that we've separated through a government agency of the creation of the United States Congress, we need to apologize to them, and we need to bring them in this country. And we need to acknowledge that actually U.S. foreign policy has played a role in all of these people coming to our borders. U.S. foreign policy for the past 30 years has actually been, in some shape, way, or form, accountable for the civil wars and tragedy that's unfolded in Central America, that's unleashed a wave of people coming here. We do need to hold the people accountable for these policies.
Thank you. Ms. Briscoe, the last word on this one?
Well, it's definitely a tragedy what is going on at the borders with children being separated from their parents. The Republican Party puts themselves out there as though they are very family-oriented and very concerned or a caring party. And this shows just the opposite, as with many of their policies. I believe that we should definitely make sure that we put maybe more of the money that we're using while they're here in this country, we can put that into foreign policy so that we'll make sure that a lot of the issues that they're faced with in their countries, that they don't have a need to come to this country. But then on top of that, as I heard earlier, we have to make sure and investigate and make sure that they're not seeking asylum, because we've always taken in people who need asylum, and we have to be aware of that. But don't just turn everyone back for no reason. But we have to definitely be more mindful and smarter, because the amount of money that we're using in order to either separate them while they're here or to care for them while they're here, that money could have definitely been used in foreign aid in helping a lot of the situations that's going on in the countries that they're coming from.
Thank you. Okay, we come to the last question, after which we'll go to closing statements. And on this one, we begin with Mr. Lawrence. And this one reads, how can we put real teeth in the enforcement of congressional ethical conduct standards and avoid the appearance of covering up by a committee of congressional peers.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that again. Sorry.
I will repeat it. How can we put real teeth in the enforcement of congressional ethical conduct standards and avoid the appearance of covering up by a committee of congressional peers?
Well, look, one of the ways you do this is just by the basis of the question is separation of function and duties. You can't have the same people who are creating the standards overseeing that. So if that's the question you're asking, you bring teeth, you put teeth into this process by having the folks who develop the standards should not be the ones enforcing the standards. That's number one. Number two is we need to ensure that when you look at standards as it relates to how people conduct, or professionals or congressmen conduct themselves, we shouldn't be looking at the lowest level bar. We ought to be looking at ways to ensure that it's the issues of, I guess, honor and trust, and being able to deliver service. That's how I can phrase it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Lewis.
I'd just like to say it saddens me that we're even having this conversation. The fact that we're still talking in 2018 about congressional ethics means that we as a nation still have a long, long, long way to go. To me, it's really this simple. We need to remove even the appearance of impropriety from the United States Congress. And here's what needs to happen. We need to strengthen the Office of Congressional Ethics with real authorities, a real budget, a real staff. I don't like saying this. It doesn't make me feel happy to say this, but Congressman Engel was investigated by the Office of Congressional Ethics and then voted to defund it. Who votes to defund the Office of Congressional Ethics? Is there anyone in this room who thinks we have too much ethics in Congress? I don't think so. So we need to put real teeth in the Office of Congressional Ethics. And you know what? We need to remove any hint of impropriety. Congressional junkets, lots of people do it. Congressman Engel didn't invent this system, but he sure does. He sure is a part of it. He represents why Washington is broken. He's gone on many congressional junkets. He and his staff have taken $350,000 of privately financed junkets. Aren't we as a nation rich and strong enough to say if our congressperson has a legitimate reason to go on a fact-finding mission, we're going to pay for it? Let's do that. And let's get the PAC money out of there. I've already spoken enough about this, but you all know it. We can't have congresspeople sitting on committees where they're also taking money from PACs. Congressman Engel has a very nice luncheon scheduled for July 26th at the headquarters of the iHeart Radio Media PAC. And at the end of the day, I'd like to challenge him to cancel that luncheon and all the money that'll come to him from it. It's a good way to set an example.
Thank you. Ms. Briscoe.
You said, it's me? Okay, so I feel that the exact people who put that particular that congressperson into office, those are the people who should be on the committee who can correct it, and there should be some swift justice. So once we find out that something has gone on, yes, there should be an investigation, and the very people who put that person in office should be able to swiftly take them out of office. And I think they take for granted too many times that it's going to go on, or they'll go through the justice system, which takes a very long time, and oftentimes it's filled with people who may agree or have some other ulterior motive for them to stay in office. But I think they should always have to answer to their constituents in their district, and they should be able to, like I said, swiftly have them removed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm certainly for strict ethical standards, and since Mr. Lewis brought it up, yes, I was investigated and I was found not guilty. You know, we have a country where you're not guilty until you're innocent until proven guilty. I was not guilty, and therefore I think that was a cheap shot. Let me also say.
Excuse me, you're taking out of his time.
Let me also say, Mr. Lewis, that the last person who from New York who came to Washington, who was a one-percenter without any government experience, was Donald Trump. I'm sure you'll follow right in his footsteps. Okay. Now, it's really interesting to talk about PAC money when your company makes millions for people with the same organizations that you don't like giving PAC money. So I suggest you look in the mirror before you point a finger at anybody else. I have always prided myself in being of the highest ethical standards, and I do think that we should have investigations, and there should be very strict rules about what should be done. Congress is an imperfect business. We have people from all over the country, but I'll tell you one thing that I know. Congress and the United States will be much better off if we have a Democratic majority and then a Democratic president, and then we can do the kinds of things that most of us up here have talked about all afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we held it together almost. Just hold it. All right, we're not done. We're not done. We held it together almost to the end. Okay, I know, it was tough. You've got, all right. But we have 4 closing statements, starting at this end this time, a minute and a half each. And again, hold your applause, whatever it is, until the end of the last one. Okay? You're on.
This is a national crisis. We've arrived at this point as a Democratic Party by business as usual. That's how Donald Trump became president. Business as usual. Our Democratic Party, if we're going to take on Donald Trump, we have to be pure of heart. Our soul has to be clean. We have to fight for what's right. And that means getting rid of the PAC money. It means getting rid of the special interest money. It means fighting for issues that are right and true and pure. And that's the way it gets done. Now, one thing I'll note is I'm proud of my career. I began with nothing. I've worked very, very hard. I'm using my life savings to help with this campaign. And you know why? Because we have a crisis going on. And if we don't stand up and fight for it, what's going to come of our democracy? And I think attacking people for seeking the American dream, like many of these people in this room have done, it's simply wrong. We need to do better for our country. We need to fight for a Democratic Party that wants to help everybody get the American dream. Because you know what? That's what makes our nation and our democracy stronger. We need more entrepreneurs, more small businesses, people who are proud of being business people. We don't need career politicians. That's why I'm for term limits. We need term limits because right now we've created a permanent political ruling class where people get into office and stay in office forever and then think they're better than everybody else. It's just not right. It's not what the founders of our nation envisioned. It's not what makes America great. What makes America great is getting everybody in this room their fair shot for serving and being a member of the United States Congress. So let's open up the Congress, let's federally finance our elections, and let's make sure everyone has a shot at being in our democracy.
Maybe some of you didn't hear me. I asked you to hold your applause until the end of the 4 statements. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lawrence.
In the next 2 days, we will all have a choice to make between an incumbent who's been here for 30 years and 3 challengers. For a few minutes, I thought I needed a duck here when I saw go back and forth. It's what we've seen across the campaign trail, back and forth. And so, for me, I've stayed above the fray because I believe if we're going to be successful, it's about solutions. It's about proof of concepts. You've heard from me so far on jobs and upward mobility and prescription drug prices. You haven't heard from me in regards to gun violence and education. I'll share that with you and I'll close. Gun violence, I happen to be the gentleman who taken guns off the street in the city of Mount Vernon, where we had the long guns and the short guns. Any gun taken off the street saves a life. I believe we have to go one step further to pursue court-ordered in cases where you have mental illness and you know of that within a family setting. Education and closing the achievement gap. Done this in the city of Mount Vernon, where we looked at kids, the highest cost kids. We call them, special ed, if you will, for lack of a better term. Brought in a company called Apple Education to ensure that we can go from a teacher-centered to a student-centered process. So we have to change the process of learning. I believe I deserve your vote because I've identified issues that's going to improve the lives of our district.
Thank you.
And I'm the best candidate for you. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Engel?
I have this slogan that I use, and that is that I ask the voters for a 2-year contract, and at the end of that contract, when the 2 years is over, I ask them to renew my contract. And that's what I'm asking for again. I grew up in this district, as I mentioned before. I've lived here since I was 12. I know the pulse of the district. I know what people are thinking. I know what people want. I've been an effective legislator. I've worked hard, and I have made many, many good friends. My district offices have helped thousands upon thousands of people with personal problems or community concerns. And Mr. Lewis said that his father was the first one in his family to go to college. Well, I was the first one in my family to go to college. I'm proud of what I've done. Again, I'm proud that all the elected officials have endorsed me, and I want to mention some of the organizations again. I've gotten an F rating from the National Rifle Association and an A rating from NAACP. So I'm proud of that.
You're taking his time.
The New York League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and Citizens United all have endorsed me. New York State AFL-CIO, the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, NARAL, Pro-Choice America has all endorsed me. They've endorsed me because I've worked hard. I've been a progressive, forceful voice. I'm about to be the chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, work closely with leadership in the House. We have a long way to go. We're far from perfect. But I'll tell you one thing. It's better to have a majority of Democrats than it is to have a majority of Republicans. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And Ms. Briscoe? Okay. Oh, yeah.
When I go to Washington, I vow to govern like a girl. I promise to be bold, present. I vow to be courageous. I vow to bring information into the district that will empower the people who are in the district so that they can improve their quality of life. And as you know, all the women that I know, they're very passionate and compassionate. And that's what I plan to bring to Washington when I go. Thank you.
Don't get up yet, but now's the time for applause for all four. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You've been a good audience, an attentive audience. Thank all of the candidates for their participation today. I want to thank particularly Amy Cooper, Janice Starr, and all the members of the various leagues that put this event together. And just let me remind you quickly of the unique and important role played by the League of Women Voters here and in communities all across the country. So, yeah. The League's work in registering voters, educating voters on the issues of the day, and protecting their right to vote is vital to the strength of our democracy. Your local league is made up of volunteers who devote their time and energy. Your participation and assistance would be welcomed. Your financial contributions would be appreciated. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. Encourage all registered voters to get out and vote on Tuesday. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Thank you all for coming. Good afternoon.